Previously, Arthur reunites with his parents and meets his younger sister, Eleanor, for the first time. While recounting his journey since their separation, Arthur carefully omits the details about Sylvie, now his companion, instead introducing her as a monobese he encountered during his travels. Reynolds, Arthur's father, shares updates about their life, revealing his new job as a security instructor at the Helsty auction house and his recent advancement to the Orange Manicore. Soon after, the Helsty family arrives, including their daughter, Lilia. Arthur learns that the estate is now a shared residence. A backyard sparring session between Arthur and Reynolds highlights Arthur's impressive growth. He demonstrates not only fire magic but also his ability to manipulate water, an advanced feat that stuns everyone. A brief flashback to Varian's training hints at Arthur's significant magical progress. Impressed by Arthur's abilities, Vincent Hellstay proposes enrolling him at Xeris Academy, the continent's top magic school. His wife also expresses interest in investing in Arthur's future. However, Arthur chooses to focus on spending time with his family for now. Later, Lilia takes Arthur to meet the servants, where he learns about the pressure she faces to awaken as a sorcerer, offering a glimpse into her personal struggles. After that, Arthur enjoying a quiet evening with his parents. The next day, he reunites with the Twin Horns members. This emotional meeting hints at future developments, as Arthur begins to realize how little he knows about the evolving world around him. The next morning, Sylvie licked Arthur's forehead, waking him up. He gently picked her up and chuckled, saying he was already awake. As he looked off into the distance, he wondered how Tessia was doing, but his thoughts were interrupted when his face twisted in disgust from a sudden foul smell. Holding Sylvie in his arms, Arthur remarked that he wouldn't be the only one taking a bath that day. Later, he brought the little beast to the water. Sylvie let out a loud cry, clearly not thrilled. After the bath, Arthur got dressed, muttering that it hadn't been as bad as expected. Soon after, a knock came at the door. It was his younger sister, Ellie, who informed him that their mother had asked her to wake him. Arthur knelt and playfully asked her to lead him to their mother. As he goes after her, the scene shifts to the market. The children dash through the bustling market. Arthur looked around in awe and asked if this was the city of Xeris. Peering through a shop window, he saw people chatting inside. Curious, Arthur turned to ask what the small balls on display were. A woman explained that they were magic cores extracted from monobeasts. These cores could increase a person's strength, although the effects varied widely. She added that for hundreds of gold, people could buy one and hope it contained the will of a beast. Arthur was surprised but thought to himself that he was quite satisfied with the will of the beast he already had. The woman further explained that their auction house often received many beast cores, and even baby mana beasts. She invited Arthur to take a closer look, which he politely declined. Suddenly, Lilia gave him a playful push and insisted she had somewhere special to show him. Soon, Arthur found himself sitting in a barber's chair. As the scissors clicked, he looked at his mother with tearful eyes and asked if this was truly necessary. Alice replied without hesitation. His hair was a disaster. The barber enthusiastically took Arthur's head and promised to make her son shine, calling him a flawless gem. Arthur could only cry out in soul-deep anguish. When the haircut was done, the girls admired his new look, saying he looked perfect. Embarrassed, Arthur stood in silence. Ellie proudly declared that he was finally good enough to be her brother. As they left the barber shop, Alice commented that he now looked like a civilized person. They strolled across a bridge where Arthur noticed a group of young people nearby. Lilia explained that they were students of Xeris Academy. Leaning on the railing, she said the academy uniform symbolized status and privilege. Arthur, unimpressed, commented that they looked like idiots. Lilia closed her eyes and said those students were considered almost royalty here. Alice approached and asked what they were talking about. Lilia explained they were discussing the academy. Arthur suddenly dashed ahead excitedly. The girls smiled, noting how rare it was to see him so energetic, especially after the events of the previous day, which made them all frown at the memory. The bell over a shop door rang as Arthur walked into a weapons store, eyes lighting up. One man adjusted his hair and warned Arthur that he was looking at dangerous weapons. Another told him that it wasn't a place for children and asked him to leave. Another smirked, saying these weren't toy swords like the ones he had at home. When one of the men tried to put a hand on Arthur's shoulder, he swiftly pushed it away and turned to leave. apologizing for intruding and explaining that he knew perfectly well what a sword was. As he headed out, the man sneered and questioned what kind of home raised such a rude boy. Suddenly, a commanding voice rang out. Tabitha entered the store and demanded the man take his hands off Arthur. She threatened to ban him and his family from participating in their auction house. He immediately dropped to his knees and apologized. Arthur, surprised, thanked her for getting him out of that situation. She smiled and confessed that she had been a bit worried about what Arthur might have done to the man. As they left for home, not far away, someone watched from around the corner. Cloaked in shadow, they observed the Silea Mana beast. Evening had fallen by the time they returned to the mansion. Vincent greeted them with a raised hand, saying they had finally returned. He called Arthur over, stating there was someone he wanted him to meet. Arthur was surprised to see an older woman who introduced herself as Cynthia Goodsky, the founder and director of Xyrus Academy. The academy was a sanctuary for any potential mage with noble birth and talent. It had produced famous scholars, guild members, royal guard leaders, and other powerful figures. Anyone who had made an impact in their world likely had ties to Xyrus Academy. Compared to other academies scattered across the continent, it was a titan, and at its head stood the renowned Cynthia Goodsky. As she and Arthur locked eyes, everyone in the room watched silently. Cynthia extended her hand, expressing how glad she was to finally meet him. Arthur hesitated, unsure whether he should shake it or respond some other way. Eventually, he held out his hand and politely returned the greeting. His mother, flustered, pushed him down and apologized for his lack of manners, explaining that he had just returned home and wasn't yet accustomed to formal customs. Arthur frowned, thinking to himself that he just hoped this wouldn't take long. He hadn't eaten in hours. The headmistress raised her hand and reassured them it was all right, admitting that it was rude of her to drop by at such a late hour. She gestured toward Vincent and said she couldn't refuse his request, given all the support he'd given the academy. Vincent responded modestly, saying he was only helping in hopes that his daughter Lilia would one day attend the academy. Lilia frowned and looked away. Cynthia stepped closer and admitted it wasn't common for her to visit a potential student's home, but Vincent had caught her attention when he claimed to be housing a child prodigy. The old woman turned to Tabitha and asked if she could take Arthur outside so she could observe him in action. Meanwhile, Arthur's mother pinched him when he asked if they could at least eat dinner first. Moments later, a couple offered their paved courtyard as a suitable space for the demonstration. Arthur, visibly disappointed, muttered to Sylvie that it looked like dinner would have to wait. The small mana beast descended the stairs with a sad expression. Cynthia turned her head slightly and asked if this creature was Arthur's father's contracted beast. Arthur explained that a bond had formed between him and Sylvie when she hatched a few months earlier. The old woman remarked that many nobles purchased mana beasts to form contracts with them, but she had never seen one quite like Sylvie. Arthur shrugged and shared that Sylvie's mother was some kind of scaly wolf with small wings. She had died protecting her egg, and he had been lucky to come across her nest. The director studied him thoughtfully. As they reached the courtyard, a man pointed forward to signal their arrival. Cynthia turned to Arthur, suggesting that they test whether Vincent's praises were exaggerated. Cynthia observed him carefully, wondering whether his calm demeanor was due to confidence or arrogance. Arthur, on the other hand, was simply thinking about the scent of fried fish in the air. Vincent adjusted his glasses and confidently stated that Cynthia would be amazed once Arthur displayed his fire and lightning magic, especially since they wouldn't have to worry about him burning the yard like last time. Cynthia asked Arthur if he didn't want to arm himself with a weapon. Arthur replied that since she wasn't going to use the wand strapped to her belt, he would fight barehanded as well. Smiling, the old woman finally agreed to begin. Arthur reflected on his training with Virion. The explosive power of fire and the flexibility of water were the first Kai arts from his previous life that manifested as real elemental magic in this world. Over time, he had also mastered earth and wind techniques. As he exhaled and opened his eyes, the ground beneath him began to crack. His body glowed with energy, and the fissures widened. He recalled how important it was to control both internal and external mana before releasing it. With that in mind, Arthur raised his leg and kicked downward, shattering the tile. He stood tall with confidence as the spectators looked on in awe. Encouraged by Sylvie and Ellie, He reminded himself that these were the foundational steps amplifiers took to manifest elemental attacks, steps that differed from a mage's approach. Arthur took a few steps back, then forward again. He was curious to see how the headmistress of the most prestigious magic academy would respond to his next move. Raising his leg, he struck a stone and launched it directly at Cynthia. She calmly summoned a protective field around herself and extended her hand. Arthur frowned as stones suddenly flew at him in return, forcing him to retreat and prepare for a counterattack. He launched himself toward her, only for Cynthia to raise her hand and send him flying back. Surprised, he adjusted midair using wind magic and created a platform of stone to support himself. Balancing atop it, he acknowledged that even with all his training, using both earth and wind magic simultaneously still required intense focus. He gritted his teeth and propelled himself forward once more. Cynthia, smiling serenely, waved her hand and conjured a whirlwind of stones. Spectators were pushed back by the force of the wind. Arthur landed on all fours, facing the swirling vortex. Inside, Cynthia's silhouette appeared. As several smaller whirlwinds formed around her, Arthur prepared to use a retroactive wind force to resist the spell. He fended them off with difficulty. His clothes were tattered by the end of it. Kneeling, he looked up in shock, and Cynthia smiled, acknowledging his skill. She commented on his overconfidence in facing her head-on and snapped her fingers, dispersing the tornadoes. Then she announced a final test, a kind of extra credit. She warned him to try and stay conscious. Suddenly, an intense beeping sound echoed throughout the area. Arthur clutched his ears in pain, suspecting it was sound magic. He realized she was a deviant. As Cynthia walked away, she approached Arthur's father and declared that the boy had passed with flying colors. Due to his affinity for wind magic, she wished to train him personally. Ray turned to her son and asked when he had learned to use both earth and wind magic so well. Cynthia frowned, puzzled by the mention of equal success. Vincent, looking horrified, reminded them that Arthur had demonstrated both fire and lightning magic just the previous day, hence why they were now using a paved courtyard instead of grass. Stunned, Cynthia asked if the boy could truly control at least 3 basic elements and 1 ultimate element. Arthur corrected her, saying he could control 4 elements in total. He extended his hand, revealing his affinity for earth, wind, fire, and lightning. Everyone looked at him in astonishment. Ray smiled and asked Cynthia if she was all right. Ellie, turning to her mother, asked if her brother was really that strong. Cynthia laughed warmly, confirming that Arthur was not only strong, but might become the strongest in the future. Later, as the excitement faded, Arthur apologized to his family for keeping his abilities a secret. His mother laughed, gently asking him not to hide anything from them again. Arthur felt a pang in his chest, wishing he could promise that, but knowing deep down that some things had to remain hidden. After Arthur's impressive display of power, everyone was overjoyed by his success. Cynthia approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. A dome of magic formed around them, silencing the outside world. Although Arthur's parents continued talking beyond the barrier, their words were muffled. Cynthia explained that as long as the spell remained active, they would be undisturbed. She asked Arthur for his honest opinion. Sensing her perceptiveness, Arthur smiled. He admitted that he had revealed his true abilities because she possessed 2 things he needed: power and influence. Looking her in the eye, he asked her to protect his family until he became strong enough to do so himself. In return, not only would he attend her academy, but he would also consider her his benefactor. Amused, Cynthia tilted her head and chuckled. She commented that even the king and queen of Japan would never dare offer her such a one-sided deal, let alone believe she'd accept one from a mere child. Arthur confidently replied that unlike the royals, he recognized the potential of that mere child, and he suspected she did too. However, he clarified that his part of the deal would have to wait until he enrolled in her academy. She raised a brow curiously. Arthur closed his eyes and explained that he had made a promise to someone important, that he would live his life to the fullest. Waiting to join the academy at a more appropriate age, he believed, would help him achieve that. Cynthia covered her mouth in surprise. A full 3 years, she asked. What did he plan to do during that time? Arthur glanced at his parents. He hadn't told them yet, but he intended to become an adventurer. A sudden scream interrupted the moment. From behind the door, Arthur's mother could be heard shouting in disbelief. Three figures stood near the entrance, and Vincent noted that it seemed they had already started arguing. Ellie clung to her mother's skirt, pleading tearfully. They had only just gotten Arthur back after thinking he was dead, and now he was talking about risking his life again? Not if she had anything to say about it. Ray placed a hand on Alice's shoulder. Though he didn't necessarily agree with Arthur's decision, he offered to at least hear him out. Alice, already emotional, glared at him. How could he say that after everything they'd endured? Arthur approached his mother gently and took her hand. He assured her that he had no intention of leaving immediately. In fact, he was looking forward to spending the next few months at home with everyone. Though he had only just returned from over 3 years in the Elven Kingdom, he felt like he'd missed out on so much, both in Sapin and across the world. He smiled, thinking about the stories his father used to share from his own days as an adventurer. Those tales had always fascinated him. Ray, watching his son with pride, admitted that he once felt the same way when he was young. He had longed for the thrill of adventure and exploration. Despite his mother's concerns, Arthur understood the dangers. Petting Sylvie gently, he recalled how unpredictable the life of an adventurer could be, no matter how strong or prepared one felt. Then an idea came to him. What if he had a guard or warden accompany him? His mother wiped away a tear as Ray considered the possibility. It wasn't a bad idea. The question was, who could fill such a role? Before Ray could respond, Alice grabbed him and shook him, furious that he would even consider such a thing. She couldn't bear the thought of their son being sent away again, not for 3 more years. They all sat on the couch to talk it over. Alice insisted that Arthur wasn't going away for that long. Arthur explained that he didn't intend to be gone for extended periods. He planned to return home every few months, or even more often, between missions. Alice looked skeptical, folding her fingers tightly. Really, she asked. Arthur nodded. Ellie approached and asked if he was leaving again. Arthur slid off the chair and reassured her gently that he wasn't going anywhere just yet. She would see her brother often. Though Alice still hadn't given her blessing, she demanded a proper explanation. Why did Arthur want to be an adventurer in the first place? Wouldn't it be wiser to attend school before taking such a risk? Trying to remain firm, Alice told herself not to give in. Arthur scratched the back of his head. He explained that if he entered the academy now, he'd be much younger than most students, making it difficult to fit in or make friends. Alice imagined her son among older students and felt a pang of concern. Ray stroked her hair comfortingly and reminded her that Arthur didn't need to rush into school. He could spend time helping his father instead. Alice finally relented a little, trusting that Ray would look after their son. Arthur smiled gratefully and thanked his father. Clenching his fist, he reminded himself that he didn't just want to train in safety. He wanted to put his skills to the test in real combat, to experience real danger, as an adventurer should. Alice suddenly began hitting Ray playfully. She couldn't believe he had convinced her this easily, but deep down, she knew he hadn't lied to her. Sylvie, curled up at Arthur's side, looked up as if echoing her support, and as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Sylvia's words echoed in Arthur's heart. To enjoy life. On a quiet island under a star-filled sky, a maid calmly swept the yard as the gentle waves echoed in the distance. From the window, a voice called out, asking Ray to slow down and chew properly. Around the dining table, several people were enjoying breakfast. No one was going to steal his food. Ray, still chewing enthusiastically, responded that he was simply happy to enjoy a meal without needing to rush off to work. Confused, Vincent asked if Ray would be attending the auction that day to help introduce new recruits. Ray asked if it was clearly just an excuse to throw a welcoming party afterward. Vincent, except embarrassed, pointed out that this was where all their absurd food expenses came from. Covering her face in shame, she tried to hide her flustered expression. Arthur, sitting at the table with a spoonful of food in hand, asked what everyone planned to do today. Tabitha, holding a warm mug, replied that she and Arthur's mother would be running errands in town to prepare for the upcoming event at the Hestia auction house. They'd be taking Ellie and Lilia along, but if Arthur wanted to join, he was welcome. Arthur coughed politely and thanked her, but said he would stay home that day. Later, Vincent sat alone at his desk, writing quietly in his notebook. His pen moved thoughtfully as he wrote his letter. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the quiet house. Vincent opened the door and found Arthur standing there. Vincent mentioned that Arthur had just missed his father. He was currently at the auction house. Arthur smiled, saying he had actually come to speak with Vincent. With a slightly awkward expression, Vincent stepped aside and welcomed him in. Meanwhile, the marketplace buzzed with activity. A blue cloak fluttered as crowds gathered for the anniversary event preparations. Alice raised an eyebrow, questioning whether such flashy items were appropriate for the occasion. Tabita replied that noble ladies were particularly fond of the jewelry she had designed. Alice examined a necklace with mild skepticism, struggling to understand the appeal. Tabita simply winked, displaying her usual flair. She confessed to having brought a few pieces from home to help decorate the private viewing rooms at their auction house. Startled, Alice interjected sharply, insisting the jewelry was nothing more than simple, inexpensive pieces she had crafted in her spare time. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she admitted how self-conscious she felt about it all. Nearby, Lilia leaned toward Ellie and asked what was bothering her. Ellie pouted, explaining that her brother hadn't gone shopping with her. Lilia turned away, muttering that, even though she had come with Ellie, it was clear she no longer mattered now that her brother was around. Lilia protested loudly, flinging her head back in mock drama. She claimed the youngest in the family loved her more than anyone else, but now that her older brother was back, she was being tossed aside. Suddenly, a hand came down lightly on her head. Tabita scolded her for tormenting Ellie. Tearfully, Lilia defended herself, saying she was only teasing, because all Ellie ever thought about these days was Arthur. Tabitha gave her daughter a curious look, gently probing whether Ellie might be experiencing her first crush. Tugging at her mother's dress in protest, Ellie insisted Arthur was just a weirdo. She bit her lip and confessed that she had believed children her age couldn't be magicians. That admission surprised the adults. Ellie clenched her fists, frustrated by her confusion. Arthur, despite being so young, had already become a mage, stronger than most adults. Tears welled in Lilia's eyes. She said it wasn't fair. She wanted to be a mage too, to make others proud the way Arthur did. The women exchanged understanding glances. Alice placed a reassuring hand on Lilia's shoulder and told her not to compare herself to Arthur. She acknowledged that they all knew he was different from other children. Lilia then asked how Arthur had become so strong. Did his parents train him? Could they help her too? Alice explained that aside from some basic sword training Ray had given him, they hadn't really contributed to Arthur's growth. Tabitha looked stunned. Visibly upset, she declared that while she understood Arthur was gifted, she couldn't help but feel something was being overlooked. Realizing she might have overstepped, she quickly apologized. Alice reassured her, saying she appreciated their concern. Deep down, both parents knew Arthur was hiding something. Lilia asked why they didn't simply confront him, ask where his strength came from, and how he had become so skilled during the time he'd been away. Alice responded gently. Of course, she and Ray wanted to know everything, but they believed Arthur had his reasons for keeping things to himself. They chose to give him space, supporting him until he was ready to open up. Tabitha accepted this with a soft nod, and the group continued walking. Not far away, someone watched from around the corner. Cloaked in shadow, a figure trailed them through the city's alleys. In a quieter street, the cloaked man stopped and handed a message to another hooded figure. He instructed him to report to Lord Sebastian that the Mana Beast was not currently with the group. A mage from Xyrus Academy had been assigned to protect them, making close observation difficult. However, the boy, presumed to be the Beast Master, was expected to attend the upcoming Hestia Auction House's 10th anniversary event. The man snapped his fingers, affirming that this event would offer the perfect opportunity. Vincent sat quietly in his office, watching Arthur sip his tea. The boy seemed calm, but Vincent couldn't help questioning the surreal nature of the situation. How could someone so young carry such a presence? He found himself more anxious speaking to this 8-year-old than he had ever been during an audience with King Sapin. As Arthur set his cup down and politely thanked him for the tea, Vincent adjusted his glasses, silently noting how different Arthur seemed compared to when he was with his family. Was this his true nature? Arthur, maintaining a composed tone, explained the reason for his visit. He had come to request a few items. Curious, Vincent asked what those might be. Arthur paused, then listed them one by one. a protective cloak with a hood, a sword sized appropriately for him, and a voice-changing mask. Vincent stood and leaned on the desk. The cloak wouldn't be an issue, he said. As for the mask, crafting one would require a specialist, a craftsman with an affinity for sound, someone likely considered a deviant by most. Still, he could try. Then he hesitated. With all the responsibilities surrounding the upcoming anniversary event, why was he putting so much effort into this child's request? Arthur smiled and thanked him sincerely. Vincent nearly stumbled at the weight of that gratitude. Arthur admitted that he didn't have any money, but he had thought of another way to repay him. Vincent waved off the offer, noting that Arthur's father had already done much for him. Thanks to the training Ray provided for the guards, crime within the auction house had dropped to its lowest levels ever. Yet Arthur continued. One of the reasons he had come was to help his sister awaken her monocore using a method he had recently discovered. And if it worked for her, he believed it could help Lilia as well. Vincent blinked, uncertain. Arthur rose from his seat, adding that he knew neither Vincent nor his wife were mages, but he truly believed he could help their daughter awaken and eventually join the academy. Suddenly, a ball rolled across the floor. Arthur held onto the bed, golden circles glowing faintly beneath his eyes. He admitted that he could only maintain the technique for a few seconds at a time. With a deep breath, he focused. Behind him, ethereal images of Varian and Cynthia briefly shimmered in the air. But even that wasn't enough. Dawn broke, light seeping into the room. The ball lay untouched on the floor. Arthur rested there, exhausted. Arthur found himself lost in thought, caught between two worlds, his past and present. His memories surged. He needed power, not for revenge this time, but to protect those dearest to him. Lightning crackled across the sky. A man dashed through the rain, clutching a bag. He slipped, and textbooks scattered in a splash of water. He reached a crowd and pushed through, eyes widening as he saw medics covering a body on the ground. The boy cried out, trying to reach the scene, but the police held him back. An officer held a transparent evidence container. A gun was inside. Arthur's breath came heavy. His motivation had shifted. No longer was it vengeance. It was the will to shield those he loved. Sylvie's voice echoed in his mind, grounding him. He gently stroked the mana beast. Yes, Sylvie was right. They had returned. After dressing, Arthur descended the stairs. His mother met him halfway, concerned. She asked about his plan to help Lilia awaken. Even as a joke, she warned, such a claim was dangerous and cruel. He greeted everyone with a wave. Lilia's mother eyed him cautiously and warned that if this was a prank, it had gone too far. But Arthur reassured her. He would never joke about something so serious. He explained that he had proposed a deal to Vincent, and the man had agreed. Vincent lifted his daughter and told everyone to gather in the living room. Arthur would demonstrate once they were ready. The adults exchanged glances and followed. In the common room, Arthur sat between the two girls. He looked at them gently and asked them to begin by breathing exactly as he instructed. As Arthur looked at the two girls, he thought about how mana was best sensed during slow, deep breaths taken in a precise rhythm. He hoped that his explanation would be enough for them to understand. Their parents watched intently. Arthur instructed them that the first step was to breathe in a special way. The girls turned slightly toward him, unsure. They asked how they should breathe. He explained it wasn't ordinary breathing, it was deliberate and methodical. With a gentle smile, Arthur added that if they could manage this, they would grow stronger, just like their older brother. Ellie, the younger one, arched her back with enthusiasm and repeated that she wanted to become strong like him. Arthur placed a guiding hand on her back. He silently hoped they would understand his instructions. Carefully, he used his hands to guide both Ellie and Lilia, showing them the correct breathing method. Following his direction, the girls took a deep breath through their noses until they couldn't take in any more air. Then, with mouths open, they inhaled again. Arthur repeated his instructions to make sure they got it right. Next, he told them to exhale in short bursts, 15 small breaths. The girls did their best to follow his lead, closing their eyes as instructed. He told them to repeat the process until they began to see lights dancing in the darkness behind their eyelids. Lilia's parents grew concerned, watching closely. Moments later, glowing particles appeared faintly around the girl. She whispered that she could see them, but they vanished just as quickly. Arthur chuckled softly and told her that the lights disappeared because she had stopped breathing. Lilia, feeling anxious, said she still couldn't see anything. Was something wrong with her? Arthur reassured her calmly. Since neither of her parents were mages, he had expected this to take more effort. The mothers exchanged worried looks. One of them, the red-haired woman, asked if Arthur could explain exactly what he was trying to do. The brunette, more familiar with Arthur's magical capabilities, said she trusted his skill, but pointed out that trying to force an awakening in a child was unheard of. Awakenings were meant to happen naturally. Arthur, still focused on the girls, explained that he was guiding them through what he had done to awaken at the age of 3. The only reason he believed it might work was because of his unique affinity with all the elements. He kept that thought to himself, but they would know for sure soon enough. He urged them to simply observe. Then, vibrant lights began to shimmer around the children. Arthur asked the girls if they could feel a warm sensation in their bodies, reminding them to continue breathing, just as he'd shown them. Energy began to flow from Arthur into both girls. Lilia's eyes lit up. She exclaimed that she could see the lights now. Ellie was delighted too, saying they looked beautiful. Small white motes of light danced around them. Arthur encouraged them to try and gather the lights together. Slowly, the luminous specks started to swirl and coalesce. He told them to treat these little lights as friends and to be happy they were there. He asked Ellie gently if she could do that for him. She nodded without hesitation. Arthur exhaled heavily. Exhausted, all 3 of them slumped to the floor. "That's all I can do for today," he muttered. The parents leapt from the couch, rushing over. Lilia's father asked anxiously whether their daughter would truly be able to become a mage. Arthur nodded and explained that although it would take years, if he could train with them for a few more months, they would be well on their way. Overcome with emotion, Lilia's mother scooped Arthur into a tight embrace. Tearfully, she asked him to finish his thought. Could her daughter truly become a mage? He answered without hesitation. Yes, she would have no problem becoming one. The woman began crying, apologizing for ever doubting him. Because of him, her daughter would have the kind of future she and her husband could never dream of. She thanked him deeply. Lilia cried as well, smiling through her tears. Then looking up, she saw her father crying too. Tears of joy. Golden feathers shimmered across a glowing white background. From that moment on, Arthur's life slipped into a familiar rhythm. Each morning he trained. Then he helped his sister and Lilia draw closer to awakening their monochores. The training sessions took place at dawn. The 3 of them would gather in the living room. As the days passed, the exercises grew more intense. At times, the very air around them froze with magic. Later, the families would gather around the dining table, chatting and sharing meals with joy. Arthur observed them with quiet contentment. Even though a part of him was always impatient to grow stronger, he still made time for these moments, knowing full well that such peaceful days would not last forever. And that's where this episode ends. Thanks so much for watching. I truly appreciate your time. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.